Very occasionally in the music business, an artist arrives and you can't believe he or she is real. They are so good, they seem to be flawless. And Michael Jackson was one of those.
He changed the face of music, the sound of music, and the industry.
Michael's work was able to cross divisions and reach people all over the world.
Everyone wanted to be like Michael Jackson, dress like him, sing like him, do the moonwalk, put the glove on the hand. I mean, we all wanted to be him because he was an enigma. We just couldn't understand how he could do all these things. It was almost like he wasn't human.
There was a media caricature of Michael Jackson, which is a very kind of simplified version of him. And then there's Michael Jackson, the artist, who, to me, is a lot more interesting.
There are very few artists who have obsessed the world like Michael Jackson did. Now musical royalty, his singles top the charts all over the globe, selling over 350 million records, whilst holding the record for the best-selling album of all time. This documentary will cover all aspects of his life, from the Jackson 5 to This Is It.
This is it. I mean, this is really it. This is the final curtain call.
Join us as we remember the King.
So Michael Jackson was born in August 1958. 8 brothers and sisters, Gary, Indiana, a community where the majority of the population was steel town workers, a part of the country as well that was suffering from high unemployment. His dad, Joseph Jackson, this strict disciplinarian, we all know that, a steel town worker, but also a musician himself in a band called the Falcons. His mother, Catherine, an adoring mum, bringing up all these kids.
Michael Jackson's past is a difficult one, it's a complex one. He's the kind of quintessential child star who's kind of pushed into the business, into show business at a very early age.
The strict regime imposed on him by his father, Joseph Jackson, meant that he was working night and day.
I mean, the background for the Jackson family was very, very modest. Joe Jackson, who managed the band and was also the father in the family, was always very, very certain that he was going to turn his children into stars. I think it was probably pretty disturbing to him in many ways that Michael was the brother who very clearly was the most talented, because he was never particularly close to Michael and he always probably gave Michael the harshest treatment.
His father was abusive, both emotionally and physically.
The impact I think that Joe's strictness had on him was very, very, very disturbing.
Michael himself talked of the horror of being beaten by his father, whipped was the word, and how his father would sit there as they were rehearsing with a belt, waiting to smack them if they got it wrong.
You know, people respond to that kind of abuse differently. And with some of the other brothers, I think that, you know, it didn't impact them the same way psychologically that it did Michael.
You have to discern your children. You have to know which children can take certain disciplines and which can't. That you have to sometimes maneuver with certain kids and treat them a little bit different, get the point across, but maybe do it a different way so that they can handle it. I don't think that Joe ever did that with Michael. He's a very sensitive person. So in other words, when he would chastise the other brothers and the other siblings, they managed to handle that intenseness from the father. But Michael, it had a different effect. He was very sensitive.
It really hurt him, and he carried it throughout the rest of his life. You know, that his father drove him and pushed him, but never treated him like a son. In fact, they called him Joseph. They didn't call him Dad or Daddy or Father. His name was Joseph, and so it kind of represented that emotional detachment.
Every time he would speak about his father, his face would contort. You could see that he was really, really stressed about his experience with his father.
Michael has said that there was a sense of joy in these early years. You know, sometimes in the hotels they'd have pillow fights and things like that. But when he reflects on his early years, in spite of the exuberance that you hear coming out of those records, he was sad and he was lonely. What Michael learned very early on in his life was that music and the stage was the place where he felt most at home.
There was a reason why he was winning talent shows at the age of 8 in the community, why he transferred with his family to Los Angeles in 1969, because the kid had ridiculous talent. But of course, he was part of a group, the Jackson 5, formed by Father Joe, picked up by Motown Records, and the rest is history.
The Jackson 5, the first black boy band, consisted of Michael, Marlon, Jackie, Tito, and Jeremy, who formed the band in 1962. At first, their father Joseph did not approve, but later decided to manage the band, who initially struggled to get noticed.
Gladys Knight was the first Motown artist to bring the Jacksons to the attention of Berry Gordy. She had witnessed them win the Apollo talent show at the Apollo Theater in New York. However, Berry didn't act at that time. Then, a minor artist named Bobby Taylor really thought, these guys have to be on Motown. And he really pressured the company and arranged for them to have a demonstration video made. And when this was shown to Berry Gordy, he changed his mind.
The Jackson 5 were part of this Motown sound, which was fresh. It was for young America. It was supposed to have kind of a crossover appeal. And with the Jackson 5, you know, they came towards the tail end of the Motown era. And they were kind of the first boy band and kind of established that kind of new music that could appeal to young people, that could appeal to black and white. And I think that was kind of the new niche that the Jackson 5 filled.
Berry Gordy said that the first Jackson 5 singles would be written by The Corporation. No names, just The Corporation, who were actually 4 people. He was one of them: Freddie Perrin, Deke Richards, Alfonso Mizell. And Berry Gordy said, we're going to have 3 number ones with the first 3 singles. That was the goal. Very audacious, of course. But with this tremendous songwriting talent, they succeeded.
I Think I Want You Back was the first time that the Jackson 5 really worked as a pop package.
I Want You Back is just a classic pop song. You know, just bursts right out of the speakers.
When you put the needle down on I Want You Back, which I did when I was at my college radio station in 1969, you were floored. First of all, the thrilling piano glissando at the beginning, and then that wailing melisma from Michael, and then he lands on the first word, when. And he had us. At the first word, we already were owned by this extraordinary young talent.
Everybody was just fanatical about them.
I think the package of the Jackson 5 works so well is because obviously Michael Jackson was this huge talent, but he was incredibly young. But I think the feeling was because it was a family band and he was spending all his time with his brothers who were part of this group, that there wasn't exploitation of any form, because it almost felt as if we're comfortable with this because we're part of a family. And that was very much how they were sold and promoted as a family band.
It is rather strange seeing a bunch of young people carrying on with the professionalism of an older dance troupe. But they could do that, and it was obvious that Joe, the father, had instilled in them the necessity to be visually as well as musically appealing.
The thing with the Jacksons was, when you saw them on TV, you would run downstairs, whoever was in the house, everyone would just run downstairs, go straight to the TV and be glued to it. And that's what the whole world was like when they saw them, because first of all, they're these young kids. They're extremely talented. They're dancing, they're doing everything. And then this little boy comes in front and has this voice that just, you're like, how God's name can he sing like that? So then you've got the kids like me at that time, 6 years old, wishing they could be like him. And then you've got the grown-ups wishing that they could do the dance moves. And Michael's voice captivated you.
Sunshine, I don't blame it on the moonlight. I don't on the good times. On the boogie.
Michael was so talented that immediately, once Joe Jackson started training them and started rehearsing with them and started, putting them in these contests, it became apparent that Michael Jackson was a star.
Although it was clear Michael was the most talented of his siblings, it is also not surprising he decided to embark on a solo career, as he was the most damaged by how dysfunctional the family were in the early years, largely due to their father. But it was really when he made this move that he truly took the spotlight as his era's most influential artist.
His voice was superior to the others. He was the one you were obsessed with because he had this cute little face.
Beyond Michael Jackson's talent, what made him kind of go beyond the group was his ambition. He was a student of the craft. And so when it was time for him to branch out on his own, he had a lot of ideas of what he wanted to do.
So Michael Jackson in 1979 brings out Off the Wall, in my opinion, his greatest solo record.
Off the Wall was Michael's first solo album. At the time, he was still making albums with his brothers, but this was a chance for him to say, okay, I've had all these ideas building up, watched some of the best artists at Motown, and now it was his chance to write his own songs, to help produce his own songs. And so with Off the Wall, he teamed up with the legendary Quincy Jones.
The most important thing about Quincy Jones meeting Michael Jackson, I believe, was that you had the older head, the experienced musician, and I mean real musician, meeting this protege. And then obviously, this is why I think everything exploded after that, because there was definitely a next level that they went to when Michael collaborated with Quincy Jones.
Quincy Jones came also to the project with this incredible background. And Michael liked that. Michael liked that versatility because he didn't want to do the same stuff that he'd been doing with his brothers. He wanted to kind of create a new sound. And, with Off the Wall, that's what they accomplished.
Without that chemistry, synergy, and relationship with producer Quincy Jones that was formed on the set of The Wiz, the movie he did with Diana Ross, produced by Quincy Jones in 1977-78, without that moment, we wouldn't have 1979, Epic Records, Michael Jackson's first solo album.
Girl, close your eyes, let that rhythm get into you.
The album Off the Wall was Jackson's first step to becoming the king of pop. He was establishing himself as the most diverse musical artist the world had ever seen, with iconic dance moves and an abundance of #1 singles. He also won his first Grammy for Best R&B Vocal Performance with Don't Stop Till You Get Enough.
Don't Stop Till You Get Enough was such a significant moment in the development of Michael Jackson as a superstar.
Came at the time when disco was starting to fizzle out, and of course it really helped strengthen Michael's identity of not only a performer and songwriter but also a dancer, and that's what we got to see in the video.
You listen to the demos of that song, and it's just amazing the kind of craftsmanship, at that young age that he already, from watching other people, just had this kind of natural sense of rhythm. And then you add on to that Quincy Jones' incredible production where he brings in all of these kind of studio veterans, and it's just layers and layers of sound, and it's incredible.
Out of my life, damn indecision and curse.
I mean, this guy was forward-thinking, and there's a reason why he gave us Thriller some 7 years later.
Well, if Michael Jackson was a superstar before the release of Thriller, as soon as Thriller released, he almost instantly transformed into a megastar.
Now, I've often referred to Thriller as the album that ruined the record business, because even though it is an all-time great classic and is the all-time bestseller, of course, almost no other album comes up to it in terms of quality of tracks.
Thriller, I think, by most people's reckoning, will always be regarded as Michael Jackson's creative peak.
What he did is surprise everyone by releasing, as the first single from the album, a duet with Paul McCartney, The Girl Is Mine, which was a bit of a soft, mid-tempo ballad, two great iconic stars on one record. It didn't set the world on fire. We were waiting for the big sizzle, and it came with the release of Billie Jean, and he never looked back.
She was more like a beauty queen from a movie scene. I said, don't mind, but what do you mean I am the one?
Billie Jean, a massive song that's had huge impact and continues to have huge impact. The huge talents of Quincy Jones, who co-produced and co-wrote the track, were obviously very visible. And the lyrical content, Michael always said, was in reference to the groupies that he and his brother encountered while they were members of the Jackson 5.
People were crazy about the Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson, so I think he was really surprised that people would react like that. You know, girls would want to have his children, and he was still a kid. I think Billie Jean was speaking about how certain fans would pretty much sort of pretend that they were having his children.
And it's such an interesting song because it became this big hit with a very unusual theme. Darker song. It's a song about distrust and anxiety and paranoia. And, you know, Michael was beginning to write songs that maybe got people to dance still, but also that were exploring some of the things that he was experiencing.
It's a historic hit for a variety of reasons. One is it forced MTV to play videos by black artists. CBS at the time said, if you don't put Billie Jean on, you're not getting our videos. Because Billie Jean was such a big hit, the public loved it and wanted it, and MTV had to recant. And ever since then, of course, there have been black artists on MTV.
Just when you watch the Billie Jean video, there's this kind of mystery about it. You know, it's kind of like this postmodern wasteland, you know, and there's this paparazzi that's stalking Michael, and, you know, he's disappearing under bed sheets, and there's this kind of narrative flow to it. But at the same time, when you get to the end of the music video, there's a lot of questions, but just the atmosphere is so mysterious.
The Billie Jean video had a great impact because, first of all, the production values, they're not expensive, were riveting. The lit paving stones, which would light up as Michael passed them, were very eye-catching.
The technology and the sophistication of the video in that time when we were still just coming out of black and white TVs, you know, and it was like, whoa, this is amazing.
But it didn't all go to plan. Only a certain number of the pavement squares themselves could and would light up once Michael's foot touched them. So Michael had a small matter of seconds, something like 20 seconds, to learn the sequence as to which pavement slabs would light up once his foot touched them. Director said, Michael, are you going to be okay with this? I'm so sorry, because the original plan was that every single slab would illuminate. It was going to be a magical moment. Michael just did his thing. He looked at the director, said, hey, I can do this, and off he went. He did it in one take.
So take my strong advice. Just remember to always think twice. Do things twice.
He completely brought the house down and won an Emmy Award for his performance of Billie Jean at the Motown 25 anniversary special. And he moonwalked. Now, he'd been taught the moonwalk by Jeffrey Daniels of the group Shalimar. Michael Jackson had an incredible sense of showmanship. And it took his career to another level. Now, no one realized that the single release of Thriller itself was coming
The Thriller song was actually one of the later songs for the album. Michael had written a bunch of songs, and one of the songwriters that had worked on Off the Wall, was also working on Thriller. His name was Rod Temperton, and he was writing a bunch of songs, and one of them was called Starlight, and he presented that to Michael and to Quincy, and they liked it a lot. They changed the title from Starlight to Thriller, try to get just a title that would kind of match the tone of some of the songs that Michael was bringing in.
People could not believe that this song was what it was. Everybody was obsessed. You were walking down the street, everyone was dressing like Michael Jackson, everyone had the same clothes on. I mean, we're talking, everyone was Thriller. Everyone became Michael Jackson. That's how big a phenomenon it was.
It's close to midnight, something evil's lurking in the dark.
And until the music video premiered on music television channels around the world, MTV, Channel 4 in the UK, well, until that moment, Michael was at this level. The album Thriller was here, hovering in the stratosphere. Once Thriller was released, once the world saw that video, he went into orbit and he never looked back.
When that video came on TV, you didn't do anything. You didn't make a cup of tea. You didn't speak to anyone. You know, this is the first video that was like a movie. It was, I mean, it was a movie, you know? You were just like, wow. You'd never seen an artist, performer, singer, make a video that's like a movie. It was a phenomenon.
Thriller is unlike anything people have seen before because it's not a music video, it's a short film.
There are two elements of Thriller which are unforgettable. One is the transformation of Michael from this nice guy bringing the girl home, and then suddenly the eyes light up and he turns into this creature. And then the zombies rise, and there's the dance of the zombies. That fascination with the zombies continues to this day in popular entertainment. I mean, it's been in feature films, it's been on TV, but an absolute classic video.
It's 30 minutes long, it's one of the biggest selling music videos of all time, and it's the greatest video of all time.
He was now a veteran performer whose music and choreography had encapsulated the world, who were on tenterhooks awaiting his third solo album, Bad.
It was interesting in 1987 when Michael released the Bad album. People weren't just talking about the music, they were also talking about the fact that he might have been trying to reach out to a generation that was starting to really embrace hip-hop music, and that was becoming a huge cultural and musical force in the industry. However, they were also talking about the look, Michael's look, and the artwork, the front cover, in fact, the picture chosen for the Bad album. Michael looking a bit more street, a bit more gangster.
Michael's self-image has changed. With Off the Wall, he wanted to make an important hit album. After Off the Wall had had great success, but had won 2 Grammy Awards in R&B categories only, he felt the work under-recognized and was hungry for mass acceptance across the pop world. He achieved that with Thriller. So now he's done that professionally, and he's beginning to worry about his personal image. And so he poses on the sleeve of Bad, looking like a tough guy.
So what he wanted to do was take more control of his image. He had a much harder image at that time.
It was a huge change for everyone. We couldn't believe his image had changed that much. I mean, he looked like a little bit rock star now.
Even though, you know, Thriller had some edgier parts to it, there was still this sense that Michael was like a Peter Pan character.
But now you think, well, you know, he's as talented as ever, but he's worried about how he's coming across.
Michael wanted to come out with a song that was a little bit edgier, and the title track, Bad, was actually intended as a duet with Prince. They met and discussed it. Prince really liked it, and Prince said it'd be a #1 hit, but he felt like it was set up for Michael to win. Because they were going to do this big music video where they're kind of having a dance off and, all this kind of drama to it. The two kind of big pop icons of the decade. So Prince backed out, and Michael ended up doing it as a solo.
At the time, I have to be honest, when I heard Bad, I was a little bit like, I don't know if I'm feeling him doing that when I first heard Bad. But what made me change my mind was the video.
I still think it's up there as one of his best, and it's also historically interesting in his career. It marks the final time he worked with Quincy Jones.
And Quincy got out before the personality problems began. Michael had 13 #1s in America as a solo artist, and 4 with the Jackson 5. And a lot of those #1s came off the Bad album.
Michael Jackson was really at the point where he could call the shots.
He was already the #1 star in the world. The Bad World Tour had kicked in. The singles were hit records. His music was all over radio stations worldwide. Bad was the #1 selling album of that year. But of course, he wanted to take his career to a whole new area and go to the next level, which he did by starring and producing this movie, Moonwalker. Now, it was never going to win awards, it was never going to win Oscars, but what it did do is showcase the singles from Bad and give him an opportunity to create the iconic and incredible video that was Smooth Criminal.
When you look at the very sleeve of Dangerous, you know we're into some choppy waters here.
It was a big critical and commercial disappointment, which is quite shocking when you look back and think of all of the huge tracks that came off that album. Most notably, of course, Black or White, which was the first single, a mega tune. Obviously, the fascination at that point was about what Michael was trying to say with that song.
Black and White was a big #1 in America, 7 weeks. The video was big news, starring Macaulay Culkin as well.
Eat this.
What people often forget with the Black or White video is that it was Michael's most controversial video, and it was censored. You have this main part of it that most people are familiar with, where it's kind of a celebration of diversity, and it's asking for tolerance and just kind of this message that everyone can kind of digest very easily. But what happens after the end of the main music video is a Black Panther kind of sneaks off of the stage, and then Michael's conveying kind of the darker side of the song and of racism.
This was the period when the world was shocked, when Michael Jackson literally did go within a few years from black to white.
Everybody was starting to question, okay, what's going on with the skin color? This is really odd. I personally believe that no one quite knew if he was actually trying to be white, but they all assumed he was trying to make himself white. And I think it angered a lot of people because people felt he was such a good-looking guy and gorgeous. A lot of us were like upset that he was changing his face. We're like, don't change your face, Michael. We love you the way you are.
Now, this was something that he always put down to an illness, some sort of rare disease. There was a lot of doubts about that throughout his life. Where was the proof of this? And actually, many people thought that Michael Jackson, over a period of time, had been bleaching his skin. So this was a real statement for him because he was essentially responding to those criticisms through song and saying, why does it matter if I'm black or white? The question back to him, obviously, was, well, if it doesn't matter, why have you potentially done something to change the color of your skin? I mean, it really was, I think, the beginning of a real terminal decline for Michael in terms of how he was viewed by the public.
Jackson was highly sensitive and impressionable, and some of the public and most of the media began to turn on him due to his outlandish behavior, such as purchasing a chimpanzee who he named Bubbles and building a giant fun fair to live in, Neverland.
In 1988, Michael Jackson set up, built and conceived, I guess, Neverland, which is obviously the place where he would go on to live for most of the rest of his life. It was also, I think, the moment when the world became fascinated with Michael Jackson's personal life. I mean, here was a grown man at the peak of his success who felt the need to live in a huge amusement park.
You're talking about a young man who first became successful with his music at 5. So you can imagine his whole life up to that point was about being directed, told what to do, and not really being allowed to find who he was because he was public property from such a young age. So I think Neverland was his creation to have a safe haven away from all of that, and also to finally express how he would like to live his life for the first time without anyone getting in the way.
When he first built this park in 1988, it should be said, it wasn't viewed as something that was necessarily overtly negative. It was more a fascination in him. As the years went on, I think Neverland became something that most members of the public and most people in the industry thought was pretty unhealthy and pretty odd.
Jackson was having a difficult time with the media, who often focused on his unusual tendencies rather than his immense generosity. He regularly gave vast sums of money to charities and worked extensively with terminally ill and underprivileged children, who he invited to enjoy the wonders of Neverland. It was at this time that his fascination with children became apparent, as he even took several children on tour with him and proposed to adopt a boy and a girl from every continent at one point.
Heal the Kids is about doing something about making a difference and trying to help adults and parents realize that it is our power to change the world that our children live in.
He suffered a horrendous accident whilst on stage where his hair was set on fire, which resulted in second-degree burns, the need for more plastic surgery, and the start of his drug addiction.
When he burnt his hair at the Pepsi commercial, he started using painkillers then. He then fell from a stage and broke his leg. He also cracked a vertebrae in his back, and those things have caused him terrible pain.
He wasn't well. You know, he had some serious illnesses, you know, the vitiligo, he had the burns from the Pepsi ad, and so he had a lot of plastic surgery to reform, you know, parts of his, you know, head and stuff like that. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was hidden.
If you're going to understand why Michael Jackson would have plastic surgery, you've got to understand that he was a human being, not a godlike figure. And he was subject to the insecurities that we all have.
Unfortunately, when he was really young, he suffered a lot of abuse, you know, from his father. His father called him Big Nose.
So he had, he says two, other people say more, rhinoplasties, that charming term given to nose surgery. And then also Michael admitted to having the creation of a dimple in his chin to look cute. But what he never admitted to was lightening his skin color.
I think everyone was very, very concerned. Everyone was just going, what's going on with Michael? Why is he changing the color of his skin? And everyone was starting to think he didn't like being black anymore.
When his skin began lightening, people didn't know what to make of it. And then finally he told people that he had vitiligo, and people didn't believe him.
We didn't understand it, because for us, he was drop dead gorgeous. You know, we were just obsessed with him. So it was a very confusing time for the fans.
For a long period of his career, people didn't even know that he had vitiligo. I think the first time that he mentioned it publicly was to Oprah Winfrey, which was 1993.
I have a skin disorder that destroys the pigmentation of the skin. It's something that I cannot help, okay? But when people make up stories that I don't want to be who I am, it hurts me.
Imagine being somebody that grows up in front of the world and you have this pretty unusual skin condition, and people are saying things like, you are ashamed of your race. you know, and you don't want to be black, you're trying to be white. So there were things that were his choice. I mean, the plastic surgeries were certainly his choice, but there were things that weren't his choice. And the skin disorder was not his choice, and it was something that he had to deal with in front of the world.
He becomes, to some people, a source of almost godlike virtue and wisdom. To other people, a figure of fun.
By the 90s, celebrity life was destroying Michael. The media depicted him as Wacko Jacko. It was in 1993 that things really took a turn for Michael, who was accused of child molestation by one of the children he was closest to.
The 1993 allegations was extremely traumatic for Michael.
How everything started to go wrong with Michael Jackson was with the child abuse allegations.
I think for the first time, people really started to think, what is wrong with Michael Jackson?
You're thinking, is it true? Isn't it true? And this was always the general consensus from people that you spoke to was, I'm not sure. And you'd have some people go, I think he did. It's typical. It was this witch hunt.
You know, Michael and you know, people that felt like they knew Michael always felt like he was being tried by the media because he was different, you know, because he was unusual, because people didn't know what to make sense of him. So of course he must be a pedophile.
I don't believe that Michael Jackson ever had serious, full sex with a child, because that would be inconsistent with his self-image. To take an adult role in sex, you have to think of yourself as an adult. And he was trying to think of himself as a child. I think if he had performed overt sex with a child, he would be so horrified he couldn't live with himself.
There was rumored that money was exchanged, that the family of Jordan Chandler were paid $20 million.
This was what was a big mistake, I believe, on Michael's part, because I think, not that it's his mistake, his lawyers advised him to do that, but I think that this made the general public question if it was true or not.
Do you think a father would accept money, that would make it okay, that would make everything all right? It doesn't make any sense.
He, in his own words, described it as a humiliating experience. They did a strip search on him, you know, took photographs of him. They had like 70 police officers go through his property. And what made him angry about it is that they never found anything that would indicate that he was, in fact, guilty.
There are two relevant facts about Michael Jackson and the subject of pedophilia. One is he did settle a court case with Jordy Chandler for over $20 million. The other is he was never convicted of any criminal offense.
We have concluded that because the young boy who was the catalyst for this investigation has recently informed us that he does not wish to participate in any criminal proceeding where he is named as a victim, that we must decline prosecution involving Mr. Jackson.
It was his lifestyle rather than his music that was the thing that the majority of people outside of his diehard fans would tend to focus on.
Michael was coming under so much scrutiny that he often needed someone who he could trust to share his life with. And in this case, it happened to be none other than Lisa Marie Presley, of whom he started a relationship with around the time of the allegations.
So you're Michael Jackson and you know how to make headlines. He does it again in '94 when the king of pop marries the daughter of the king of rock and roll. It was also during the troubles and the allegations that Michael faced during the Jordan Chandler investigation in '93 that apparently he reached out to Lisa Marie Presley and she was the confidant. She was the person that spoke to him on the phone. And at the time, of course, you have to remember he was also battling painkiller and drug medication addiction.
All of a sudden, people were very, very concerned about the way that he looked. He was incredibly gaunt, incredibly white, looked incredibly surgically enhanced and not in a good way.
Nobody saw this coming.
Here was the biggest music star of the last decade, undisputedly, marrying the daughter of the biggest music star of all time, Elvis Presley. I mean, it was completely fascinating. And I think to this day, No one really knows what the situation was between Michael Jackson and Lisa Marie Presley.
I thought this is really unusual. How did that come about as well? But then we all know that Michael did things that was just unusual. He was always unusual. But the two of them getting together, this was very, very strange indeed. I think everyone was like, how did that happen?
And so they pretended for a while that it could work. Maybe they even believed it could work. Maybe they were so happy that I've met a peer. But they obviously were incompatible because the marriage was short-lived.
I think after there was so much intrusion and there was so much media coverage of, the tabloids went nuts and didn't believe it was real. And I guess it must have impacted the relationship somehow.
So I don't think the world was that surprised when Michael Jackson's marriage to Lisa Marie Presley ended in divorce.
After his and Lisa Marie's divorce, Michael decided he wanted to have children as soon as possible. This is where Deborah Rowe came to the rescue.
She was quite a plain-looking woman. She was incredibly no-nonsense. And they had been friends, but I don't think anyone really believed that there was any form of sexual chemistry or connection between the two of them.
For reasons that haven't ever become totally clear, Michael decided to marry her. Michael had wanted kids for a long time. In fact, he wanted kids with Lisa Marie Presley, which is one of the reasons why they got a divorce. She was a surrogate mother that provided him 2 children.
She's the woman that gave birth to Prince Michael and his daughter Catherine.
Prince, I wish for you to learn about perseverance and confidence and the true meaning of success, which is love, and to know that you can reach any goal that your heart desires.
Daddy?
Yeah?
Thank you for giving me ice cream. You're the best dad in the whole world, and I love you. Daddy, thank you for my birthday cake, and I love you so much. And I love my daddy so much.
By the end of their marriage, which was very problematic and very troubled, it became very clear that Michael had viewed Debbie as the carrier of his children, really. And in the end, she basically signed away her rights to those children.
The press really did give Michael a tough time about being a father. However, when he finally released some home footage of him with his children, when we finally got to see footage of him at home with the family at Neverland, I think that it was obvious to all of us what a doting and perfect father he was. Just look at that moment where he was celebrating, I think, with Prince, his eldest son. He'd laid out some sort of puzzle on the floor. He calls Prince over. He sits down with his daddy. He starts playing with the puzzle. Michael starts singing. And it's so obvious that there was a father and son who adored each other.
In 2002, Jackson has a third child, Prince Michael, also known as Blanket, whose biological mother was never revealed. But he claimed it being a result of artificial insemination from a surrogate mother and his own sperm cells.
Blanket himself became front-page news and a star in his own right when Michael dangled him. He held on to him, but he dangled him over a balcony in a hotel in Germany to hundreds of his fans who were downstairs on the ground crying out for him to show his new son.
Again, you have to ask, okay, why did he do that? Because he did it voluntarily. Nobody was holding a gun on him saying, hold your child out at a great height. And he was so carried away with the excitement and happiness, and also proving, look, I'm a man, I have a child. And for that moment, he forgot the interests of the child.
It was a moment as well that was featured in the Michael Jackson, Martin Bashir documentary. But at the time, he defended, despite so many people criticizing exactly what he did, including child protection charities, Michael was determined to argue his case, saying, I'm a fantastic dad. I was holding on tight. I got caught up in the moment, but my child was never at risk.
It happened for like 2 seconds, but when it gets on the news, they slow it down. They don't show the crowd. They make me like I'm this eccentric idiot dangling his baby over a balcony like a nut.
In 1995, 2 years after the child abuse allegations, the world was yet again waiting for a new Michael Jackson record. An album that would ultimately make or break him.
The release of History did not go down well. It was a greatest hits package combined with a new album, and there are a whole load of stunts which were really derided. For example, Michael Jackson deciding to send a massive statue of himself down the River Thames in London, despite him being still caught up in all of these allegations of child abuse.
And I was on breakfast television that day, and people were talking about this and raving about it. And I said, I don't want to spoil the party, but I'm the only one here who isn't thrilled by this, because this really indicates a loss of perspective.
The record itself goes to #1 in the UK and around Europe, including Germany. It stayed at #1 for weeks on end. In fact, it was the Christmas #1 of 1995. The album History was back into the top 5 because of this record.
And actually, I always felt like History was probably his most underrated album ever. I mean, some of the songs to come from History are completely iconic. They Don't Really Care About Us, Earth Song.
With Earth Song, there's a demo that was going to go on the Dangerous album, but Michael was such a perfectionist that he just wasn't quite satisfied with it. So when he came back and did it again, he has these really gritty, this kind of gritty shout, that he's doing against, the choir would come in, what about us? And then he would come in, with this kind of shout instead of the cry, the falsetto cry. So it's just these kind of subtle changes that would take place that, in a lot of cases made the song better, but it took years.
The Earth Song video really was something quite powerful. It had quite an impact. I mean, Michael didn't pull any punches with this video, and of course, the last 2 minutes of the video show the Earth being reversed back to goodness, trees going back up, and the sun shining, and ultimately, Michael Jackson looking like the savior.
So then the second single came along, and it was You Are Not Alone, and it was a real Michael Jackson ballad in the true sense of the word. And it did become a huge hit for him, I guess really against all odds, because the music video was incredibly strange. I mean, it featured Michael Jackson almost naked under the sheets with his wife, Lisa Marie Presley. And it was a very odd music video.
And this is the moment that sends the History album racing up to #1 and went on to sell over 20 million copies worldwide.
After mixed reviews of History, Michael then released Invincible in 2001, an album that took over 3 years to be created.
I think it's fair to say that in terms of Michael Jackson's career, Invincible, his 2001 studio album, wasn't his finest hour. Critics accused Michael of borrowing from old ideas. It was too much like Smooth Criminal, a bit like The Way You Make Me Feel. Michael was accused of being a bit tired and jaded. However, he also suffered as the album release tied in within weeks of the madness and the tragedy of 9/11 in New York. And at the time when he was meant to be promoting the album Invincible, Michael took some of the biggest names in music into a studio to record a charity single called What More Can I Give? Sony refused to release that single, and from that moment, the promotion of Invincible suffered. And in fact, within 6 months, Sony had decided to stop promoting it altogether.
In 2003, Jackson is again charged with sexual abuse and administering intoxicating agents to Gavin Arizo, a close child friend of Michael's, who was under 14 at the time of the alleged crime.
The service of the warrants was part of an ongoing investigation alleging criminal misconduct on the part of Michael Jackson. The basis for this investigation regarding Mr. Jackson involves allegations of child molestation, 288A of the California Penal Code.
Then we have this surreal moment where the biggest selling artist of all time, one of the biggest stars in the world, is captured live on 24 news channels, handcuffed, walking into a police station.
This was his worst nightmare. he was pretty clear to those around him that he thought a trial of this kind would kill him.
The trial dragged on for months and it really wore him out.
He was emphatic that he was an innocent man. His family came out in support of him. Some of the biggest names in music said, how can you accuse Michael Jackson once again of such a heinous crime?
I don't believe any of this stuff that's being written about him because I raised him and I know him, and that's just a statement people are making.
We support our brother wholeheartedly, and we stand by his side, and we're in the process of planning a trip with the whole family to visit him.
The world felt for the first time, at least the world of the media, that actually maybe these years and years and years of managing to get around the law, however he'd done that, had finally caught up with Michael.
Please keep an open mind and let me have my day in court. I deserve a fair trial like every other American citizen. I will be acquitted and vindicated when the truth is told.
So much of the attention on Michael Jackson through that whole 6-month trial, which was just, wall-to-wall coverage, was on his eccentricities, scandals, all these different things. And I thought, what's getting lost here is that Michael Jackson is an incredible artist.
Michael Jackson's career in America was effectively ended by the allegations of child abuse.
So after being found not guilty on all counts in 2005, after the media had essentially put Michael Jackson through one trial and, of course, the court process the other, Michael had gone away to work on new music, to bring up his 3 children, and we had waited and wondered, would he ever return to the stage?
The announcement of the This Is It tour, which had been backed by AEG, was very significant. Money was a huge factor for Michael Jackson over his final years. He was broke. He'd lived well beyond his means. So the idea behind these farewell concerts that he was very passionate about was not only that he could go out in the way that he wanted to on stage, but also that he'd make the millions and millions of dollars which he desperately needed.
This is it. I mean, this is really it. This is the final curtain call.
The idea of a limited series of shows at the O2 in London had grown to an extended season.
All of a sudden, there were 40 dates, and then potentially there were going to be more, and it was going to be a residency, which could last well over a year.
Everyone wanted to believe that he was the eternal Peter Pan.
Then he started rehearsing, and there were very, very concerning reports to come out of these rehearsals from quite early on, really. Reports that Michael simply wasn't turning up to the rehearsals. Reports that really just months out from the start of these career-defining concerts, Michael hadn't even been able to perform a few songs in a row.
Get me out, bam. Something right there. Into the nighttime. Four walls won't hold me tonight. If this town is just an apple cart, let me take a bite. And they say, why?
I always thought that Michael would be tempted to take refuge in some form of sedative. Because clearly to anybody, just thinking about it, it's an extraordinarily worrying prospect. I've got to go out there for over 50 nights and do this incredible workout?
July 2009 was going to be the moment that Michael finally returned to the stage and proved why he had the title The King of Pop. And of course, as we now know, it was never meant to be.
Fire paramedic 33, what is your address of emergency?
Yes, sir. I need an ambulance as soon as possible, sir.
Okay, sir. What's your address?
It's 100 North Carrollwood Drive, Los Angeles, California, 90077.
You said Carrollwood?
Carrollwood Drive, yes. Yes.
On June 25th, 2009, the Los Angeles Fire Department responded to the 100 block of Carrollwood at 12:21 and 18 seconds. Unfortunately, at the time, the dispatcher answered the phone call and never once did the caller ever identify to the Los Angeles Fire Department that the person that needed our help was Michael Jackson.
He's not responding to anything. No, he's not responding to the CPR or anything. So.
Oh, okay. Well, we're on our way there. If your guys are doing CPR and you're instructed by a doctor, he has a higher authority than me.
The question is, why did it take Dr. Murray so long to dial 911? Only Dr. Murray can answer that question. Obviously, fast response saved lives. Why Dr. Murray took so long, and however long he noticed that Michael Jackson was down, it's unexplainable to us.
I had thought that for the past 15 years, Michael had obviously been on a downward trajectory in terms of his relationship with reality and his perception of himself. What I couldn't know, of course, and which nobody knew, was the extent to which he was taking prescription drugs. And there's only so much the body can take. I thought Michael Jackson would not go into the hospital voluntarily. He'd have the hospital come to him. This is really serious.
I still can't believe it. I mean, he's like the last of one of, I think, God's gifts of innocent, loving person that cared truly about everybody, and there's nobody else like him.
This man brought us together, baby. We love Michael Jackson.
I think it was the incredibly powerful and emotional moment that Paris Jackson spoke at her father's memorial in July 2009 in Los Angeles, where she, through sobs of tears, told the world how much she missed her dad and what a great daddy Michael had been. I think that was the turning point where the media decided to actually celebrate the fact that Michael had been a fantastic father to 3 children.
Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine.
The Jackson family were subject to more heartbreak when in February 2010, the cause of Jackson's death was released.
How do you plead? Your Honor, I am an innocent man. I therefore plead not guilty. Thank you.
I think Dr. Conrad Murray was part of why Michael Jackson died.
I know that allowing a patient to take this drug off hospital site is extraordinarily unwise. And to do so on a occasional or frequent basis is to invite death.
Michael had problems, and he felt a lot of pressure, and there was a lot of money involved, and certainly Michael made choices. But at the same time, there's this doctor that had an ethical responsibility, even when he's giving him this propofol, to monitor him, to not leave the room.
It was gross neglect, and this was not someone that I would trust as my doctor.
There's a lot of negligent doctors out there who've done horrendous things, and they're still practicing medicine. Their patient wasn't Michael Jackson.
Dr. Conrad Murray knew what he was doing. He knew that the things that were being asked of him weren't ethical. He made his choices, and he has to live with the repercussions.
You have to remember, for some people, it's difficult to say no to a superstar. If Michael Jackson wants something, I've got to give it to him, because otherwise I won't be his doctor anymore.
I think the guilty verdict for Dr. Conrad Murray was not a surprise in a lot of ways, because yes, he had helped Michael Jackson get this huge quantity of propofol, which was the drug which in the end did help lead to his demise. I do have a feeling, however, that Michael Jackson was going to get his hands on these legal drugs in any way he possibly could. He was addicted.
Jackson often said he felt like the loneliest person in the world. And in 1982, he narrated the storybook album of E.T., the Extraterrestrial, another outsider from children's fiction he identified with, like Peter Pan. He often said, E.T.'s story is the story of my life in so many ways. However, unlike E.T., Jackson never found a true home except on stage, which was, he said in 1979, where I'm supposed to be, where God meant me to be. If ever there was an illustration of the fact that celebrity destroys what it touches, Jackson was it. But we remember the King of Pop, not for what others said about him, but what we heard in his music and saw in his performances. The most influential and multi-talented artist of all time.
When you talk about Michael Jackson's legacy, I mean, wow, we could talk all day about his contribution. I mean, it's that significant, a complete game changer. When we talk about influence, it's there in the videos, in choreography, in style, in playing the media, in promotion, and in songwriting.
Michael Jackson's work resonated for people because of the soul that Michael put into it. And people could feel that. There was something genuine. There was something that just radiated life in his work.
So we all know that Michael was the ultimate performer, one of the greatest showmen of all time, but he was also a perfectionist, and he never ever stopped recording, writing songs. I mean, that's what he did whenever he had spare time. He was constantly writing lyrics. He was constantly in the studio. He wanted perfection. He wanted to find the next hit record. So after Michael passed in 2009, a whole new generation of fans were downloading and buying into Michael Jackson's music like never before.
I think you saw when Michael Jackson died, something that maybe certain people didn't expect, which is that there was this huge outpouring across the world.
He is the greatest selling artist of all time. He's influenced a generation of artists, be it Beyonce, Justin Timberlake, Bieber, Rihanna, some of the biggest names in music today. Whenever I interview these stars, they all talk about one man. They talk about Michael Jackson.
Michael's work was able to cross divisions and reach people all over the world.
He changed the face of music, the sound of music, and the industry, and the world is a lesser place without him.